Welcome to today's guest lecture titled Designing Intervention for Better Health in Indonesia, Theory, Adaptation, and Practice. My name is Muhammad Hafiz Haunan, and it is an honor to serve as your Master of Ceremony this afternoon. Thank you for joining us for this academic event hosted by the Department of Health Policy and Management, Universitas Gadjah Mada. To begin our program, it is my pleasure to invite Professor Yudi Mahendra Datta, Dean of the Faculty of Medicine, Public Health and Nursing, Universitas Gadjah Mada, to deliver the opening remarks. Prof. Yudi, the floor is yours.
Yes. Okay. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Very good afternoon, everyone. So let's start with a question. The question is, how do we design health interventions that can really change the lives in Indonesia? That's the question that we will seek to explore this afternoon. In a country as diverse as ours, interventions cannot rely on technical strength or effectiveness alone. They must be behaviorally informed, culturally rooted, and shaped by real human experience. So in that spirit, today, we're honored to learn from distinguished scholars. We have Professor Dr. Matthias Rieger, who will speak on the power of behavioral economics in shaping health interventions. And we have Dr. Margarita de Vries-Mecheva on nutrition labels, family dynamics, and food choices. And we have Dr. Robert Sparrow on adolescents, agency, and nutrition behavior through innovative food voucher study in Solo. So their insights will challenge us to imagine ways of designing interventions that are intelligent, adaptive, and impactful. We're also to have our professors later, Professor Laksono and Professor Mubashir, who will offer reflections from Gadjah Mada. Their response will help us to bridge global insights with local realities, ensuring that the ideas here can be translated into strategies that are relevant, feasible, and effective for our health system. So in many ways, this seminar brings the world to Indonesia, but also Indonesia's wisdom to the world. And this event is also an important milestone in our partnership with Erasmus University Rotterdam, a partnership which has been around for quite a while and grounded in the shared belief that the best innovations emerge when we blend global perspective with local knowledge. So together we aim to cultivate future health leaders who can think across disciplines and design interventions that resonates with people's daily realities. So in ending this remark, I'm not going to do a productive discussion. That's too easy. I'm going to ask you to make this discussion productive. So I'm asking you not just to take notes, but prepare questions. Better yet, prepare difficult questions. Our colleagues from Rotterdam love difficult questions. That's what I know from Erasmus for many years. They love challenging problems. They love difficult questions. So please give difficult questions, because transformative ideas emerge when we challenge each other, question assumptions, and we learn together. So this is not merely a seminar. It's an act of co-creation of knowledge, policy insight, and future leadership. So let's together spark fresh thinkings, pursue bold collaborations, and renew our commitment to design interventions that can uplift Indonesia. Thank you. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you very much, Prof. Yudi, for your insightful and encouraging opening. Ladies and gentlemen, before we proceed, allow me to introduce the moderator for today's sessions. Our moderator is Ms. Diah Ayu Puspandari, lecturer at the Department of Health Policy and Management, Universitas Gadjah Mada. Academic work focuses on health economics, and she has been actively involved in several national and international research collaboration. We are delighted to have her lead today's discussions. Ms. Diah, The session is yours.
Thank you, Mas Hafiz. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. So, very good afternoon. So, we already have a preliminary lecture from Prof. Yodi with good insight on what will we discuss today. So, please prepare your difficult questions for them. So, I would like to invite for all speakers, Prof. Yes. Dr. Robert Sparrow and Dr. Margarita to be with me in front. So I would like to invite you one by one with 15 minutes presentations. Would you like to first, Prof. Matthias?
Well, thank you so much for inviting us and taking the times out of your busy schedules to listen to us and to listen to some of the research we've been doing. We might not be able to give a lot of answers, some partial answers, but at least we can stimulate a discussion, and that can lead to some co-creation between Erasmus University and UGM. So let me go to the slides. We have an presentation. We'll go from theory to adaptation to practice. So I'm curious to see what your questions will be. We will focus today on behavioral insight. I just want to be clear, behavioral insights can only give one explanation, a partial explanation. Of course, we also need other types of insights as well, because not all problems purely be solved with behavioral insights. But we wanted to focus on that today. And I also wanted to mention, which direction do I need to? Yeah. So we're focusing today on behavioral insights, but Erasmus School of Health Policy and the Global Health team actually has a broader set of focus areas. So we have individuals focusing on health systems and healthcare financing, smart use of technology, knowledge translation as well. But I wanted to give you an example today on health behaviors and the kind of the work we've been doing there. And that's also in collaboration with my colleagues that come from other faculties. So at Erasmus University, we very much try, like you do in your research centers, also to cross faculty. So we are also part of the Rotterdam Global Health Initiative, which includes Erasmus Medical Center, the School of Economics. Margarita is a representative. The Institute of Social Studies in The Hague, which Robert is representing. And so the research that we're presenting today is also, collaborative across these faculties. Oh, thank you. So I'm an economist, so my apologies. Often economists think in very rational ways, right? Stereotype, because a lot of our models assume that people make rational decisions, they maximize utility, they have no emotions, they make no mistakes, they have no future self different from their current selves, and that's often our starting point. But of course, in reality, we're all humans. We know we don't behave like that, and that's where real economics comes in. You like my drawing? That's what I made for you. Do you see that's the Homo economicus? It's maximizing utility and happiness with the available budget and prices. In reality, what happens, let me call it Homo realitatis, so the real human, we make mistakes, we forget, we procrastinate, we're present bias, we always last minute making our slides for presentations. I was, fixing them this morning before getting into the car, and I could have planned maybe better. And we avoid sometimes information, especially when it comes to health information. Let's say you go to a doctor and you get a health test. Some people actually don't want to see the result because they're worried about the result and they avoid that information. When it comes to health, also, we misperceive risks very differently. We might have very high risk of catching a NCD, but we actually underweight that risk psychologically. But we also respond to peers and social networks around us. And I think all of these insights matter for health investments and behaviors. Why? Because often health investments involve making an effort now, spending resources now, and getting a gain in the future. And so there's a time dimension, and behavioral economics gives you some insights. Often people make very time inconsistent decisions. But also there's often a risk dimension. Certain health behaviors lead to certain risks, and often we have misperceptions of these risks. So I think my arguments are threefold, and I think then my colleagues will follow some practical examples. Behavioral insights can to some extent show us how certain individuals react to policies, okay? And what will come out that certain individuals will react very differently than others. So there's different behavioral types. You might be a person that is not procrastinating or present bias. You might have a different response to a government policy than another type of individual. But behavioral insights can also help us to augment the uptake of health interventions or the. But if we really want to study the first 2 points, we also need to think about how to test that in practice, how to use experimental methods, mixed methods to see if behavioral insights can actually also deliver. Because there's been a lot of work in the past and using behavioral insights that wasn't based on very good studies. A lot of hypotheses that didn't turn out in reality to be very useful. So next. So I just wanted to give a few examples. I read and colleagues have told me that Indonesia has rolled out a new health screening program, very ambitious. Essentially on birthdays, certain age groups will get a letter or some of invitation to get a preventive health screening. Now, how can behavioral insights be used to think about this intervention? Well, if you think about health screening, this is about evaluating risks. So maybe I'm a person and I think, well, I'm hypochondriac, hypochondriac. I'm very nervous about my health. Even if it's a small risk, I always think like, I will die tomorrow. The risks are very high. Overweigh psychologically my actual risks, the rational kind of risks. Or you might be an individual, you actually under the risks. So you say, well, I don't need a preventive health screen, I'm fine, but you're actually very much at risk. So then for this kind of program, you expect that certain behavior types will self-select into this type of screening, and it can actually help you then who you will be actually reaching with this kind of screening. But of course, there's also, I have a graph for you. No formulas today, just graphs. So here you see, for instance, on the vertical axis, you see the subject rate assigned to a probability, for instance, having a certain disease. And on the horizontal axis, you see the actual probability. And it happens often that we see in reality that people overweigh the smaller risks and they underweigh the larger risks. So depending where you are on the risk schedule, this risk line here, the screening tool might be taken up very differently. But there's also another point that comes into play here is that, for instance, for preventative screening, this is very much about health gains, right? And people, from a behavioral economics point of view, it gains very differently than losses. So usually we're less responsive in terms of our, happiness, utility when it comes to gains, but we react much more strongly to losses. So this is another kind of behavioral insight I think that can be useful for this type of screening program. Well, this is a screening program, but we also often have information provision, public health information. I picked up one at the airport earlier this week, where you get information in the bathroom on your urine color. And behavioral economics can also tell you how you respond to this kind of information, because it could be, I'm just improving my knowledge. Maybe I didn't know about this. So it's pure information provision, but it could also act as a reminder. And it's a kind of different behavioral mechanism. But it can also be actually telling me something about making something more salient that I already know using these kind of visual graphics. But it could also be, as I said earlier, I don't actually want to see that information. I'm actually going to run away from it and ignore it totally. And it might actually have opposite effects. So I think behavioral economics can also be used for this kind of information provision. Now, I said then, let's say you have some theoretical insights, you want to apply to different interventions, maybe to improve them or understand who will respond to them. And then you actually have to also design experiments, and these can be relatively scaled to see if certain behavioral mechanisms are actually at play. And the steps then are usually, and you will see that today in the presentations after me, you identify a societal problem or you identify an intervention that you want to improve. And then you can theories about which behavioral and non-behavioral drivers might be at stake. So sometimes there can also be an interaction between the two. It could be that you have distorted probabilities, distorted risk preferences that interact with other factors that structural, cultural, or economic as well. Then we usually, in our experiments and studies, we try to seek input from stakeholders and maybe with new interventions or ideas to test them out. And then usually I think what we try to do is test them out in smaller pilots and then see if we can actually scale and if that works at all. Often what happens is that between the experiment or the RCT and then the scaling, there's something happens. And often there's then a failure. It doesn't work out in practice. And actually we had some interesting discussions of why that might be the case. And often then it's linked to the health system. Or contextual factors that lead to kind of lack of scaling. And I think where I think your department has a lot of strength and is similar to our department, the School of Health Policy Management, we have these different perspectives. I might come with a behavioral intervention, but then with expertise in health systems and health financing says, well, this is not going to work at scale because of this and this and that reason. So to make it concrete and give you actually some concrete examples. And we wanted to focus on one topic we've been working on as a team, and that's on the nutrition transition in Indonesia. And I think you're all aware that nutritional patterns are changing. We see increased consumption of prepared foods, processed foods, rise of non-communicable diseases, while we're still grappling with, stunting rates and as well as undernutrition. So there's kind of this double burden of malnutrition. And especially very prevalent or especially younger generations, such as children under the age of 5, but also adolescents are at high risk because they have different nutrition plans, and also we're setting them on a path for the rest of their life. And Margarita has made a nice graph. I wanted to show this one to you, just to kind of put some evidence to this. These are monthly average expenditures per capita for different food groups or commodities over the years, and that's on survey data, expenditure data that we have for Indonesia. And Margarita has done these calculations. And you see, for instance, that there's a big increase in prepared foods, both in urban, but also overall at the aggregate and national areas. And so this might be one of the drivers why we see a rise in communicable diseases as well. And then it's trying to understand, okay, is that good or bad? And if there's some negative consequences of that, how can we address them using behavioral insights? And that's where I wanted to hand over actually almost to my colleagues. So we have 2 concrete studies that recently completed where we also would look for your feedback. So these are not published studies. We're still kind of in the process of writing them up. So if you have any advice and challenging questions, we would really much appreciate that. The first study will look at adolescent girls. It's a collaboration with Professor Tree at University in Solo. And we have a collaborative study with Bryn that Margarita will discuss. There's also other behavioral experiments that we've been doing in other countries, more focusing on medication adherence, antibiotic dispensing, TB and nutrition. But we thought we'd kind of give it a focus with these 2 studies here. So may I hand over to Dr. Sparrow? Yeah.
Thank you very much, Matthias. You can call me Robert. You don't have to call me Dr. Sparrow. Okay, is the bottom one here? No.
I think we go to another slide.
Okay. So while we wait, I'm Robert Sparrow. I'm an associate professor at the International Institute of Social Studies, which is part of Erasmus, so one of the colleague institutes. I'm also associated with Wageningen University, which is a completely different. Now we wait for the slides. Yes. So this is a study where we have done the fieldwork last year. We're now wrapping up the paper. So any comments are would be really appreciated. So this is a joint study with colleagues from UNS in Solo. You may know some of them. These are Tri and Sabrina from UNS. As I said, we did the fieldwork last year, and I would just like to some of the results we have, and specifically the design and the objectives. So what we are interested in this paper is to see whether we can leverage agency to influence adolescent food choice. Right? So can we leverage agency in terms of their influencing their nutrition behavior, and we do that by intervening with two specific mechanisms. So we intervene with the economic mechanism in the form from food vouchers. We then introduce a policy, a nudge, an agency nudge. Essentially, these food vouchers can be seen as a vehicle in which we package an agency nudge, and we then try to test different economic theories. So we try to essentially test contrast neoclassical economic theories with behavioral economic theories. Now, this is a public health school, so I won't go too much into the economic theory. So let me focus mainly on the application. But our hypothesis is that by increasing agency for adolescents, we can essentially improve the effectiveness of such a intervention. Right? So that the agency itself improves nutrition behavior in addition to the voucher program that we introduced to them. Now, people that know me know that I have terrible time management, and I also bring too many slides to a presentation. Just to preempt that I'm going over time, I put everything that we do in the paper in one slide, and then I'll go on and we'll see how far I get, right? So this is a slide just with the design. So the key result is the key element, or the key element to that agency nudge that we introduced. So you have an idea before we go on the slide what we're doing. So we've done a behavioral experiment just down the road from here in Solo, in 5 junior high schools. And we looked at the first 2 classes in those junior high schools. So I would say class 1 and 2, but I think you call it class 7 and 8, right? These are kids ranging from 12 to 14 years old. And we introduced this food voucher program, or a food subsidy, that's how you can see it. It's subsidy for lunch for these children. And we focus on adolescent girls. And in that food voucher program, we use an agency nudge, and I'll explain later how we do that. But essentially, it means that some children have a choice, and others do not have a choice in how they in that food voucher. That's essentially the treatment that we have, and we want to measure, or we want to test, how does introducing that agency nudge provide these girls with agency in the decisions or in their food choice. How does that affect their preferences and their actual consumption? When we introduce agency, do these girls then, does this increase the healthy preferences, and does it increase their consumption, or does it increase healthy consumption? And without going too much into economic theory, so the hypothesis that we have, or the theory, the behavioral theory behind this, is that it's not just the consumption of healthy food that gives that provides benefit, or as economists would say, utility. But it's also the choice itself. The act of choosing provides utility or provides benefit, or let me put it a different way, that individuals appreciate the fact that they make that choice. And it comes from 2 different mechanisms. The first is that by making a choice between a healthy, so imagine 2 people having the same food, but a healthy meal, but one was given the meal and the other had the privilege of choosing that healthy meal. It's the act of making that choice that you can say to yourself, I am a healthy person. So it's a form of identity confirmation, or signaling an identity to yourself, healthy individual. And behavioral theory would also predict that we would prefer to be consistent in our choices. So once we have confirmed our identity as a healthy individual, we'd like to follow up on that with later decisions on making healthier choices, and not deviate from the decisions we've made earlier. So behavioral theory would then predict that if we would give an individual an active choice, so the act of choosing itself, not so much the food itself, but the act of choosing may push adolescents toward more healthy, towards more healthy preferences and healthy decisions. Now that goes against sort of standard economic theory. Hence, this gives us a nice test to see whether behavioral theory provides additional explanation to food choice by adolescents. So what do we find? And I'll later explain how we introduce this experiment. So just keep an eye on the time. What do we find in our experiment? Well, we do see that, first of all, by providing vouchers, both with and without choice, girls consume more healthy food. Now that's expected also from standard economic theory, but we subsidize healthy food so they consume more. But we also see that outside that decision around the healthy food, that the agency, the providing agency, so giving these girls the opportunity to make that choice themselves rather than to impose that choice for them, decreases the consumption of unhealthy food. So we see that these girls follow up in subsequent decisions with more healthy preferences. And finally, when we also directly test preferences of girls or food preferences of girls, so outside the context of a canteen where there's pay with money, but we directly test health preferences of girls, and then we see that providing agency increases healthy preferences, but only for younger girls, right? Not for the older girls, so for class 7 and not for class 8. So these are the findings. So this is the setting, the main theory that we want to test, and the mechanisms through which we think agency, or for which we hypothesize agency, will affect preference and our results. So let me use my last 5 or maybe 10 minutes to give you some of the details. I'll skip this slide because Matthias already explained why we would be interested in adolescents. Now, all 3 of us here, at least Matthias, Margriet, and I, we all have children that are teenagers in different stage of being a teen, and we know. So that's the essence of this slide. We know teenagers are very complex creatures for various reasons, right? They go through physical, but also emotional and cognitive development, or I would almost say transformation during that period. And it's a period, adolescents are also vulnerable. They're beset by different risks, hence they are an important group to focus on. Now, let me go to the food environment. So this is something I normally show these slides to don't know the Indonesian context. So what does a high school canteen look like? Now, this is in Solo. I don't know, maybe it's different here. Maybe you have a healthier canteen, but we were quite shocked what we saw in the canteen. So this is the canteen in junior high schools, and this is the option that they have for their lunch. So it looks very pretty, lots of colors, right? But it's pretty, lots of sugar, lots of deep fried stuff, very little healthy options, right? And it's what these girls and boys, what they consume. So this is the context of our experiment. So we produce this nudge just in the voucher. Now that happens in a fairly controlled environment where they make the choice. That's in the classroom. But then we just let them loose, and we just buy your lunch, and we don't want to control that. We really want to let them loose in their natural environment, right? Their natural habitat of the canteen. So what do? We have 3 types of vouchers that we give to these children. We randomize these into 3 groups. One group gets a voucher to purchase a healthy meal at a vendor in the canteen that we put in place. So Tree and her team, we actually provided food. We were selling food to these kids. So we had relatively healthy, relatively unhealthy options. And 1/3 of our sample, a random sample, 1/3 of the sample, they received a voucher, a subsidy, 5,000 rupiahs, with which they could purchase one of those meals, a healthy meal. Another third, another random sample, received the same voucher, exactly the same voucher, but they had a choice. And as they received the voucher in the classroom before they were in the canteen, they were asked to make a choice. Do you want to spend it on a healthy meal or on an unhealthy meal? And that's the nudge, right? That's essentially what the treatment was. The rest is exactly the same. They go with the voucher to the canteen and they can purchase a healthy meal. We don't know what they do with it. If they trade it with a friend, we don't know, but it's about the fact that they can make a choice on the spot when they get the voucher. And then we have a third group and they get a voucher for stationery, but of the same value. So at least that all groups all received around 5,000 rupiah. These are all kids in the first two classes of junior high school, as I mentioned earlier, so ranging from 12 to 16. 5 schools in Solo, and the first 2 years of junior high. And overall, we had 70 classes, and we randomized this across classes, not individuals. Now, I think I explained most of this already, right? So 5,000 rupiah vouchers. They could use it in the school canteen, but they made the choice on the spot in the classroom. Oh, something happening with the screen. No, it's still functioning. I think I explained all of this already. Yes. Now, what are our outcome variables? So how do we measure preferences? When we let these girls loose in the school, how do we then what they like to eat or what they, right? There are lots of different factors playing a role. They have budget constraint, right? They might have pocket money, a voucher. So how do we really capture preferences? Well, what we did is we had 3 moments that we measured their, that we did the best with these kids. Once at baseline and twice in the follow-up. And then as a thank you, after filling out the questionnaire, or as a courtesy rather, we offered them a free meal in a little box, just as we received one as you came in. And this was a meal, and they could then pick one. But that was the test, right? So they could pick and we would look at we would monitor which meal would they choose, a healthy or unhealthy meal. So that was the test. And that was then a measure of their true preferences. It was a free meal. It was a courtesy that they would sort of recognize as a common custom. And we had that as an outcome 3 times, once before the experiment and twice after. And these were the options. So, and they were both relatively, I wouldn't say call them healthy, right? But the difference would be mainly in the type of nutrients that they would receive. So in this case, in this example, one has vegetables. They both have a protein. One has deep fried chicken. The other has a cooked chicken with a sauce. But the difference is mainly in the vegetables. And the other measure that we had is actual consumption. We asked them, what kind of food did you consume in the last day? So let me just skip quickly. I'm going to skip some of these slides because I only have 5 minutes to go. So I want to show you the results. Now, maybe this is not the most, no, let me stick to this slide. So this is the data from the food diaries, so what we really consume. And what do we find here? So this is the regression of the type of treatment they were exposed to. The control group here are the kids with the stationary voucher, and we regress this on all the different type of foods that they consume. And we find indeed that both groups they received a voucher. So of course they consumed more healthy food because they had subsidized healthy food. See that the healthy voucher, the effect is slightly larger than the choice voucher. And this is what neoclassical economics would predict, right? That they both consume a bit more of healthy food, but those that have a choice voucher maybe a little bit less because they could also use it on unhealthy food. But statistically, these are not significantly different from each other. So we can't really prove that these are different. But what we see in the second column, and that's the unhealthy food. So these girls, they purchase their healthy meal, and then they still have pocket money, and they seen what these canteens look like or what they can, what they can buy outside school. The girls that had a choice voucher that had to make that choice on the spot and had to and potentially signal to themselves that they're a healthy person, they consumed less unhealthy food outside the context of that experiment. And that cannot be explained by standard neoclassical economics, right? That's can only explain by our behavioral mechanisms that we couple of sites take place. Now, from this chair, with this, it will be difficult to explain what's happening in this diagram. Basically, what this reflects that same choices. On the left-hand side, we see the differences in the choices between the three groups. Each day that they are subject, that they receive a voucher. So they receive the voucher 6 times over a period of 3 weeks. So we see the decision every day. On the left, we see the healthy choices. On the right, we see the unhealthy choices. And sorry, I should say on the left, we see the consumption of unhealthy food on the left, and on the right, the consumption of unhealthy food. And if you look at the very first day, so with number 1 on in either graph, that really reflects what we just saw in the diagram. So in the first day, the blue line, the control, consume much fewer healthy meals or fewer healthy items in a day than the 2 voucher groups, right? The green and the red line. So we clearly see that the green and the red dot on the first day on the left are well above the blue line. Well, that's the effect of the transfer of the subsidy. Then on the right-hand side, we see that the blue, the control, and the red, the restricted voucher, so those that did not have choice, they consume an equal amount of unhealthy stuff. Right? So outside the experiment, the kids with a healthy voucher, they just then consume the same unhealthy stuff as the control group. But the green dot, those are the girls that had a choice, actually consume much less. Right? Where at baseline, there was no difference. This is really the effect of just the voucher. So this is exactly what behavioral theory would predict. But then, of course, as we go through the weeks and we have the second, third, up to the sixth, we see that the food voucher groups kind of converge. But it's really in that first day that we really see those behavioral effects. Then if we go to the free choice meal, so this is actually, of course, purchasing food in the canteen or elsewhere, right? It is really purchasing something with money, but also reflects budget constraints, income effects, etc. But here we see the free choice experiment. So what would children choose if they just get a free meal and they might not be aware that this is a test? And then we see that overall we don't see significant effect. We do see that for the younger group, that both right after the experiment and also a month later, it's the girls that received the choice voucher that are likely to choose a healthy meal. Whereas at baseline, and I don't have that table here, but at the baseline, there are no differences between the groups, right? So we were quite baffled that even a month later, they would still choose, or more likely to choose healthy food. But we don't see any effect with class 8. So I don't know, maybe this is where things become troublesome. I'm not sure. Right? That's still a question we have, and we cannot answer this question yet. Why do we see this difference between class 8 and 7? We have lots of information on psychological traits or other characteristics, and we do see differences between these 2 groups, but we cannot explain difference in this effect. So maybe you have some. This is still our open question. Maybe you have some answers on that. So I'm going to leave it here because I'm running over time. So I'll leave the conclusions as they are. These are exactly the same conclusions I showed on my third slide, right? We do see an effect of agency on consumption, but that does not go beyond the context of the experiment. We also see effects of agency on preferences, and they do endure beyond the context of the experiment, but only for the younger groups. And I'll leave it at this. I hope I stuck within time to some extent. I'll hand over to Rita.
Very unusual way to present like this. I understand the setup, so it will be difficult if I stand. So I will close my beautiful slides. Okay. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Margarita, and I lecture at Erasmus School of Economics. My research that I will present today builds on my PhD studies, which I did also in Indonesia with children. Work is a collaboration between three of us and Pugu Enrica from BRIN. It's been a while since we get funding for this study, and finally we've got support from International Institute of Social Studies and also a grant from Erasmus Rasval. Well, the core motivation of this study is quite obvious. So as Matthias shows, that Indonesia is going through nutrition transition, and diets in Indonesia and other countries in the global south suffer from higher consumption of processed and prepared foods. We know that one of the policy response, at least in Europe, is interpretive nutrition labels. And for example, we have Nutri-Score, ABCD, that we put on products. Consumers can understand which item is, which product is more healthy or less. So, and I think we just decided to try and test a similar type of interpretive nutrition labels in Indonesia. So what we actually do, sorry, I didn't know that you will show this. So what we actually do, we test the nudge, which is, we call it traffic light labels. We label food by yellow, green, it's obvious, so green is a healthy, yellow so-so, and red is not healthy. And we test this in two environments, in online experimental supermarket with mothers, and experimental sort of a food booth or snack vendor with children. We also were interested if parents who were actually nudged and saw labels would dare to disapprove the unhealthy choice of the children. So we also added the element of parent-child interaction, and I will explain you how we operationalize it in the So additionally to that, we also ask mothers and fathers some other questions about the nutrition knowledge, and we also ask children a question what they like to eat and why they pick certain snacks, and measure child weight and height to have these anthropometric measures also for all controls. So this is our experimental supermarket in the market. On the left-hand side, you see the control. So half of mothers was assigned to this condition. It's a control, so there is no labels. Mothers were instructed to buy food for a week for family consumption using virtual budget. So money were given, they were just allocated 800,000 rupees, and they said like you can buy up to 800,000 rupees, and after you complete the task, we will have a lottery, and 1 out of 15 will get this basket delivered tomorrow to her home. So done not to incentivize, but to ensure that our participants buy foods that they actually consume, because every chance to win. So as I said, on the left-hand side, the control condition. On the right-hand side is the treatment condition. Half of mothers saw the foods labeled by our traffic light labels. And below you have a couple of pictures. One left picture is how the briefing was conducted. So we did schools. Mothers came, and then after registration, they were, with their phone, they could access our supermarket. So the middle picture shows the interface on the mobile. And on the right photo on the bottom shows your happy mother who won the lottery and received her food next day. Okay, so this was for mothers, this was for children. So on the left picture shows a happy vendor in one of the primary school in Bogor, which actually created this vendor for our experimental booth for children. Two differences there is that we have fruits and water. The rest are almost the same as our vendor has. We also divide children randomly for two groups. One of them see the table with snacks without labels, and one see the table with labels, and we also inform them what these labels mean. So we put this in the middle, the note, which label more salient for them. Did I do it? Okay. Oh, cool. Okay. Okay. So this is the last stage of our study. On the left, you see our children fill with. So we instruct every child, so you pick the snack, but please don't eat it. Your parent will come pick you up, and then she or he will tell you whether you can eat it. And on the right side, the mother, so when mother comes, one by one, we tell the mother, so we offered your child a snack. So this is what she picked. Are you okay with this or not? So that was the design. So what we found out at the end, we had almost 900 pairs of mothers, fathers and children, 21 public primary school. Well, most of them were females. We just had a couple of fathers. Age of all parents, caregivers, because sometimes it was older sister or grandmother. 29% of our children in sample are overweight, obese, and half of their parents was overweight or obese. So most parents and caregivers have high school graduates, and almost half of them are employed. These are our results. So this graph shows you the shares of green, yellow, and red items in the parents' grocery basket. So the left part is control conditions. So 53% of items were green, which is very good, and 31% is red. And the right column shows you what happened when the parents saw traffic light. And we see significant increase in green items from 53 to 64, is significant decrease on red items from 31 to 15. This is just a little bit to show about distribution. So left side distribution of green items in control condition, red line, and treatment condition. You see that the graph is moving. So meaning that start buying more green items. And the right graph shows you distribution of red items. Red is control, is treatment, and it moves in another direction. So the number of items, red items, decrease. So from 6.6 to 4.2 on average products per class. Turning to children. So these are children. No surprise. Most of children chosen the healthy snacks, 63% in our control condition, and only 12 of them opted for fruits, vegetables, fruits and healthy drinks. In traffic lights, we see again significant decrease of those who picked the unhealthy snack, and you saw our table. So it was overwhelmingly unhealthy. At least half of them, well, took this, but it is decreased from 63%. And we see the increase of after children saw labels of green items. I think important to notice here is that our fruit are very local, not very attractive bananas. Sometimes they were very small, but still children were picking them. Well, this is a little bit about action. So we didn't see many parents who would say something about the children choice. Usually they would say, yes, it's so good. But still some of them 41% in treatment, 41 parents in treatment condition, they actually disapproved the snack of children. And well, of course, not green, yellow and red. And then our children were just offered the additional fruit. We looked a little bit small, but I'll just tell. We looked at the heterogeneity of treatment effect between boys and girls, children with overweight and a normal weight, and we also looked at heterogeneity of employed, unemployed parents, and parents with normal or overweight. So what we see that the treatment worked better for boys, and also overweight children also responded to our treatment. So it gives us a hope that this can really help tackling the issue of obesity. For parents, we didn't find heterogeneity of treatment, but we continue exploring potential underlying mechanisms of the choice. So this study has, we think, quite policy implications and also call for future research. It seems that traffic lights labels can work in food packaging and to understand intuitive way to inform people about nutritional quality of products and motivate the healthy choices. We urge policymakers to focus on child nutrition and do something with the school food environment because it's extremely unhealthy, and healthy eating habits from the early life will help children to maintain their good weight and well-being. And of course, it's one-shot intervention. We need to do more research, longer term exposure to labels may differently. So we need to test it. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Or thank you. Thank you, Pak Yodi. So I'm just thinking I should enter as one of your sample, maybe. Because of the food choices is important, I think, childhood, yeah. So before we go to the discussions from the participant, I would like to invite Prof. Sono and Prof. Mubasir as discussants. We know already that Prof. Laksono is also a promoter of our healthy canteen. Prof. Laksono.
Online, okay. Dulu ya. Okay, thank you very much for this very interesting study on behavior economics. Waktunya berapa menit ya? 15 ya. Dihitung ya. Apa yang itu? The first thing that struck me about the cultural context of this research. So your respondent is in Solo, ya. Solo, and Solo is in Indonesia. Yes. The question is any study with the same topics in the Netherlands or in the developed countries, or I will say the four countries, because we have 2 seasons only. You have spring, yes, summer, and summer, fall, and winter. And this is related to what is so-called like the perception of race. And you said that the healthy food just, yeah, maybe it's not so interesting. Okay, the point that I make about how the same study, if it is organized or done in the 4 seasons country, is it the same result? Because in my understanding, in Indonesia, don't have any perception or any understanding about race. We don't have any synonym of race in Indonesian's word. So we call race as a risiko. So that means we don't have any culture of race from years ago, because in my understanding that the 4 seasons citizens, you have the culture of race. For yes, the winter can be mild winter, or the probability can be a one. Okay, so you have to wear or to stock your food during the fall to face maybe there is a probability of severe winter. Okay, but sometimes it's becoming very mild. Yeah. But in Indonesia, the 2 seasons between dry and rainy season almost just the same. Just only we have to use umbrella for them like that. No risk. So that's why we don't have any culture of risk. Yeah. So that's why I don't know in this term we have the term of nekat. You know nekat? I don't know. What is in English? Nekat is not fearless, but nekat. We don't have any risk calculation. Just do it. And when we look at the negative impact of healthy eating, like diabetes, for example, it will come maybe 25 years in the future, not now. So that's why we have the terms of nekat. If you are a soccer fans, we have bonek. Bonek is we like maybe the Ajax fan go to Eindhoven for football match and don't have enough money, just only ride the bus and then something like that. This is, I don't know. This is the things that maybe struck me. We don't have the culture of race. Yeah. So that means we don't enough understanding about we have to eat healthy food. Why we have to stop smoking? Okay, because the bad impact will be far away in the future, and the probability, we don't know about the probability. Some of the proponents for smoking said that 75 years old, I smoke every day, but I'm still healthy. Yeah, something like that. So yes, something like that. I don't know. Do you have the same result in Netherlands about this? The same result? Yeah.
I think that a very good comment and a very tough question. So the promise was fulfilled. You gave us a tough question, but I think it's a very witty remark, because there is a lot of variation in what we call preferences, risk preferences, time preferences across cultures and even within cultures. And I think economic theory can accommodate that. So that's why I said different populations respond very differently to, for instance, a screen mutation, even within the Netherlands. And you're saying that essentially risk preferences are not very present, so people don't assign very large probability of something happening.
Bahasa Inggris. Iya. London ya.
So that means we absolutely need to test it out in specific locations to understand what's going on, and then maybe think about solutions. So you're saying that people don't have a good perception or perceptions of the risks. Is there a way we can actually highlight these risks better to them? And that would be some area where behavioral insights can be very useful. But I wanted to put a question back to you, if I may. So you said risk preferences, you don't have a good conception of risk. What about time preferences, patience? Do you encounter in your daily life, or some people, they're relatively more patient and others more impatient?
Yes, this is culture. I'm a Japanese,
Yeah.
In Japanese, we have the way of life if alon-alon waton kelakon. We can do this slowly, and it's good for our life.
You're patient.
Not patient. We not in hearts, not in this is the culture of Japanese like that in Java. But if the Japanese go to Netherlands, it's different story. They have to go to Netherlands pace of life. But this is like slow living, something like that. Yeah, this is happening in Java, in the remote of Jakarta. You can see people at 10 a.m. still watching the bird, something like that, bathing the bird. It's slow living, something like that. So if we go to Papua, it's different again. In Papua, jam karet, it's like jam karet is a rubber hour. Like we don't start the meeting punctually. Yeah. Okay, because the value or the difference of time is not so punctual like in Holland. Yeah. So this is the things that teman-teman paham nggak ya?
But I think that offers a lot of opportunities for interesting studies, seeing how different interventions in different areas within the same country might actually have different effects. There's another dimension, is not only, let's say, cultural or geographically, also varies a lot over the life cycle. So for instance, my son, he always asks me every morning, he bikes to school, it's nice. Why do I need to wear a helmet? I say, well, because I'm worried about your head. He says, but all the Dutch kids are not wearing helmets, he's German. I said, yeah, well, I have different risk preferences than the Dutch parents. So that's a cultural difference between me as a German parent and within the Netherlands and the Dutch parents. Robert did, or Margarita did with their children, if they wore helmets. But also there's a intergenerational dimension. My son is more risk-taking on the bike. He is not so worried about the risk of not wearing a helmet. So there's also, there's geographical variation, but also intergenerational variation.
Yeah, as I to my students ya, paham ya maksudnya. Kita menghadapi masyarakat yang tidak paham risiko jatuh sakit pada 25 tahun mendatang, tetap minum yang manis-manis sekarang yang namanya mix use atau sorry, Thai food, yeah, all is bad food, but the young they drink a lot, yeah, benar ya. maybe that they don't have any perception of risk. I don't know.
Maybe just to add something to that, I think Matthias' response was very clear and very well, complete, I would say. But yeah, first, that's something that picture I had in my mind when you were talking about no risk in people don't experience risk, or at least in the food environment, right? In the production process with only 2 seasons. You do have a very big volcano next to this city. So I thought there is risk, right? It's not that this is a risk-free environment. There's a very volcano. When we as Dutch people see that, we get a bit nervous. So maybe we just we experience risk with different things, right? When things that we grow up with. But then when I see your mountain traffic, I think, oh yeah, maybe there's not so much risk perception on the way they zigzag between all these cars. But the point I just wanted to make is, or maybe just is, one of the sort of the inspirations, if I can may say, I'm now speaking on behalf of Margarita, I think, when she started with, when we started to work together on these experiments, is that there is actually quite a lot of research, right, on food behavior and choice and nudging, but almost nothing on low and middle income countries, right? A lot of that evidence is from the US, from Europe. And so just to follow up on Matthias's there's actually really a lack of evidence on our behavioral mechanisms and preferences and risk and time preferences. So I think that's actually also just that, for that reason alone, very useful to do more of that research. And if we can uncover more heterogeneities, that's great. But just also for all of you in this room, right? There is just a really very little evidence for low middle income countries.
What compared to the high income country? Is it the same result?
So our study in Solo with adolescent girls was inspired by a study in the US, not with adolescents, but with poorer families who have a food stamp program or a food subsidy program. And they found similar effects. It's a slightly different context and slightly, it's a different program and a different population group, but it's a similar idea. That's where we actually got the idea from to introduce. They also introduced the nudge in this into this program, and they found actually not much stronger effects than we found. But then it's different. It was a much larger study and a different population group. So our slightly weaker, and we don't know why. Maybe that's also because it's a smaller sample, or teenagers are just really complex. That's another alternative explanation. But other than that, there is, I don't think, are you aware of other similar studies like this with similar results?
Yeah, there were gazillions of studies of traffic lights labels elsewhere, but again, nothing in the low middle income countries. I also wanted to add, so half of our mothers are already overweight and obese, so it will not be 25 years from now. And I think it's already in Indonesia, that's top death cause is NCD. So I think it's a very important policy issue that should be tackled immediately, I think.
Yeah, but the point is, because the issue is only persuading, only like appealing, or maybe we have to have a strong regulation. Like in Singapore, they have like some, yes, the green, yellow, and red sign of not healthy, something like that. Because if only appealing or a soft campaign, I think because we don't have the perception of race, maybe it is. Yeah, I think we have to have a stronger policy.
So what would be a stronger policy would be, for instance, sugar taxes or taxes on beverages. But I understand they're delayed or it's not moving forward. Do you have any insights on the taxation of these? Because that would be very strong, right?
Yeah, the industry, they don't like it. So
Yeah.
the sugar industry try to halt this policy very, very fiercely. It's the same with tobacco industry at the moment. Yeah. So.
Yeah.
Yes.
Tobacco, we already have tobacco tax earmark to
Yeah.
health, but not yet for sugar.
Yeah,
And
but tobacco is still very, very cheap.
low,
So
yeah.
very cheap.
Yeah.
So maybe we can have the local government policy, not the central one. The local government maybe is more, I don't want to say it, but maybe they think better than the central government because the industry is very, very strong.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Prof. Mubasir, are you already online?
Yes. Thank you.
Yeah, so yeah.
But yeah, thank you, Matthias, Robert, and who's the name?
Margarita.
Margarita. And I enjoyed the presentation. I'm a bit familiar with some kind of rationality theory, but my background is more on sociology of health. But what I get from this discussion is if I assume that I'm a policymaker or even at the school masters or the village health, which try to introduce a good policy choice among the food. And let me clarify my understanding on this evidence and theory behind the evidence. Since I'm familiar with more rational choice theory in general, so if we gives people with options, they will choose the one that make them feel benefit from them. And usually if it is shorter, they like shorter than long-term one. So on that basis, if we want to persuade or promote healthy food, we have to make them something choice. And the first speaker has shown us that reminders as a mechanism where we can give our people options. Reminder is options, and also giving them option if they want to do this. And I think the agency-driven decision, it means that we have to make the people make a choice, and that is better rather than to persuade them, to regulate them, or even to make a campaign on this is a good food. But we have to make them think of what good for them. Even their decision is made by other previous knowledge, previous preference, and those things. But I agree, if we make the traffic light labels and what the other one is what is Robert show us about? That is also voucher, right? I don't know what is the mechanism when the voucher is given, because if the voucher who can buy the bad food and healthy food, if they understand before that choice, that means if we want to make the people practice better health, we need to give them a reminder and information about the choice, and probably their familiarity with the labels. If, for example, like there is a red, green, and green and yellow, and if they remember of those things related to the green is this and this, that make it easy to make a choice. Is that the thing that you want to conclude with that? And if that is the case, policymakers should think of what type of reminders and labels that make them easily understand the content. And that is the successful story of whether it predict the success of our healthy behavior campaigns. What is your point? So what is your comment on that? My understanding on how I can make use of this evidence for making better policy to promote healthy behavior.
Thank you so much for these thoughts and reflections. And I think they echo a lot also our thinking when we're designing the studies and thinking about the mechanisms through which they could work, the interventions that we devised. I think I appreciated a lot is you mentioning these reminders. So if we think about the traffic lights, could think of them like reminders, right? It could be that I'm a person I know I shouldn't be buying this processed food, but I kind of forget during shopping. So the kind of the red light is like a reminder, hey, Matthias, stay away from that. Then you made a comment that links to information. So you need to have some knowledge, and then you're reminded of that knowledge. Or another way of thinking about it would be making this bad choice more salient. Can you still hear us? Yeah, okay, you're still there. So in that sense, information provision and knowledge provision is still very, very important, I think. But it could well be that you're responding to the traffic lights without having the nudge. You're just kind of being nudged. You're not thinking about it much. So we're not actually tapping into your knowledge, and there's not some kind of reminding of information. So sometimes people find that actually these kinds of nudges change behavior without necessarily changing knowledge. So we haven't looked at that, but it might well be that we'll know better after our intervention. So that has implications, how successful this intervention is going to be, because different mechanisms will be activated. When I think about the agency intervention, I don't know, maybe Robert can comment on that. There, you as a sociologist, I think you made good remarks. It's about getting people to think, and Robert was mentioning a lot that this is about self-selling. So there's more thought process here. It's not just intuitive response, but actually we want to get them to think. So we are giving information at the beginning, all of the groups, but the choice group actually now has to think it through a little bit. And so often I think information provision has very weak effects because it's just unilateral. I'm telling you what to do. But we all don't want to listen to that, or we don't have time, we don't have attention for it. If we can engage others to think it through, the effects might be different. I mean, that's why we're all educators, right? Because we want to engage in conversations like this, and that changes our thinking. That's a little bit the idea of it, and I think that echoes with what you've said. Robert, do you want to add, or Margarita?
Thank you, Matthias.
Yeah, maybe just to follow up on what Matthias said. And if you look at both experiments, they differ slightly in. So we haven't really talked about application. I think that's in the title of the presentation, right? Practice application. Was that what shown is the design of the experiment and the results? But indeed, I think your question also refers to, so what do we do with that in practice, right? For policy. Yeah. The traffic light, I mean, that's a policy you could actually implement straight away, right? You could just put it in that vendor that Margarita showed, that shopping, put it, and her results show what we may expect if we apply that, and we can take it and apply it. For the agency, we are not really testing something that we could directly apply, right? We are not also not proposing to hand out these vouchers, for example, right? That's not. So what we try to do, we design the study in such a way that we can test a theory, right? So we have the contrasting theories that the dominant or the mainstream economic theory doesn't explain certain behavior, and we tried then to use voucher. I think I used the term vehicle, right? It's like a vehicle to test a behavioral response that is predicted by behavioral theory. And if we do find an effect, we may be able to then integrate that into another policy context, but that needs further analysis and further testing. And maybe just to echo what Matthias just said, the way so I would envisage this in a policy is that what we're actually thinking about is how can you engage with teenagers, with adolescents, in making policies more effective. And indeed, is that just top-down, paternalistic approach, imposing a policy and actually not giving them a voice, or do you want to engage with them in the decision-making process, right? Do you want to make them part of the debate and essentially give them some ownership over the decision process? And that's why we want to test whether we can see those behavioral effects, or in this case, agency, whether we can see those behavioral mechanisms manifest themselves in an experiment. But the next step, before we could translate this to policy, is really to think carefully, okay, so if we do want to intervene in a school food environment, we first have to think of something sensible, probably not a voucher, a choice voucher, but something that is practical and appropriate given the context. And think about how can you then give voice to the recipients of that policy, right? And I think that's the sort of the process, or the sort of, or let's say the stages of gathering knowledge of how policies can work that we have in mind. And both these papers are sort of a different phases there, and so that's how, at least how I look at these experiments. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I try to come up with the ideas of agencies but I think it is right for me, and I agree with you that making them think before they make a practice is good to give them a reflection. We are introducing ideas of how to make the school children in the high school, in the primary school, to choose the better food in their environment. So we ask them to tell how is their experience is having bad food and good food, and discuss with the student why they like the bad food, why they don't like the good food. But during the discussion, any other student also promote their experience. So through the interaction, they can see good food is different perception from one to that other one. But they make the discussion, make them think, probably I should try what they think is good rather than what I think good. I think that sort of issues that to make students understand, have a voice on what they feel about something is important for making a choice, right? Okay, that is only my experience working with the high primary school student. When we just don't want to give them, this is a good food, you should eat this, but we like them to have some personal reflection on their experience, whether they are really good food for them, or compared to other people discuss about the same food, or better or worse food. Thank you. Thank you very much. I try to escape from the theoretical economic things, because that's why I don't understand that much. That's why I'm working a bit to translate this your evidence into more practical value for the policy making process. Sorry about this. Thank you.
Yeah, I wanted to thank you for these very remarks, and what really resonated was that saying you want to give them a voice and contribute their own thinking and reflection. That's very important, that they have some ownership. Well, what Robert said. So I think there's a lot of connection, even though we come from different disciplines and we have a different language and methods, which I think is also the beauty of a department like this, policy management, that you can engage across disciplines. So that's very fruitful discussion. Thank you.
Thank you both.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you, Prof. Here and Prof. Laksono for the discussions. Applause for them. So now I would like to invite for all the participants to, if you have any burning questions or something want to clarify,
Check. Okay. Thank you very much. Good afternoon. My name is Maharani Tirusha. I'm a first-year student at the Master of Health and Policy Management here in Universitas Gadjah Mada. It is very interesting study that the three of you has conducted, and I believe it is also aligned with Indonesia's newest regulation or program called Makan Bergizi Gratis. It is basically a free meal program in Indonesia for students across every level, starting from primary, secondary to higher education. And I believe it would also scale up to um, apa, to other community as well. But my question is actually about this behavioral study because from the study that the three of you has tell us it is actually very good to make them have a choice to choose whether to have a healthy food or unhealthy food. But with this free meal program, they are basically forced to get that food. Like they don't have a choice to choose the menu to what they could eat at that day. They basically had only received it at the lunch period, and they had to eat it. Or if it's not getting eaten at lunch period, they could bring it home. Actually, some of the at the Indonesia situation right now, it's like that. So I would like to ask about your opinion on this program. Actually, like it is basically a contrast from the study that you had mentioned earlier that it is good to make them have a choice, but our government right now basically had a program that make them not have a choice to take that healthy or unhealthy food. Thank you very much.
So please, you want to respond?
Right. Well, thanks for. And so this is actually a really difficult question. Talk about difficult questions is I don't know that much yet about the program. It's of course fairly new. I just read the headlines in newspapers and I hear a little bit of opinions here and there from people. I think it's difficult to translate sort of the behavioral studies to the context of such a large national program, right? I think it also where I see, but that this now goes beyond the topic of the presentation, where I see this also deviate from sort of Indonesian social policy or social protection, if you can group it under that topic, practice in the past. Other programs that have come before, whether it's in health or education or nutrition or food subsidies, or there's actually been a lot of attention on targeting, right? And I guess that's the big difference with this policy, that is just a one-size-all recipe for the entire country. And I can imagine this is a program that can be very effective in certain contexts, right? And there can be really help nutrition of certain children in this country. But in other parts of the country, there might be different needs, right? So indeed, and I think it seems to deviate really with many of the preceding programs or current programs in other sectors. In terms of behavior or what we looked at agency, I don't know what is where the kids are refusing this food, right? Because that's really what we would look at, right? Are kids not eating this food or still, right? Ignore the food and still go to the KFC after the lunch break. I think that's what right? There would be perhaps scope to test certain behavioral factors. Can we make it more effective? But if I look at the design of the program, I would say my first concern would be the targeting, right? And really looking at even regional differences in needs and demands. And because I can imagine certain areas, there's more demand for more of the food, or trying to get the kids to stay away from other food. Whereas in other parts of the country, actually, this is really a good addition to their daily nutrition. personally, I would think that is a more pressing concern with this program than whether it's top down or whether agency is involved, right? I think that's still a thing, but I think the targeting here is a sort of a would be a more pressing concern or policy concern for debate. Yeah. I don't know what about this or others.
Well, I agree with Robert. We need to consider more about what is the problem that we want to explain on this aspect, right? And the generalization for everyone, because this line like the one size fits all for the country is very difficult also too, because cultural is not considered as matters, right? So I mean the question is interesting because student just asked to eat, they don't know what are there. So I think it is good to have some additional education or information why we have this today menu, for example, we do this and that. That could make them better health, better can introduce a healthy behavior practice, right? Healthy behavior choice, right? But so many of some of our observers said that if the student just ask to eat, they don't know whether it is why we should eat this. Probably it is good to provide information, labels, and everything to understand the food that they eat. Could be a better model for to create good consideration for them to choose other food in other setting, rather than they just don't want to think about what's good, what's bad in terms of food. But I agree this is difficult. We need to put into the context and whether it's not a one common problem for us to understand the behavior from different setting and regions. Thank you.
Thank you. So do you think that the ability to choose the right product or right food is affecting also when they are after schools? They still have plenty of time choosing what they eat, or
Yeah, I mean, we know that children make choices the whole day, and there's a few meals a day. So there's one meal, but they might offset or behave differently outside of that specific point in time. And also think, I mean, just observing my own children, what children eat and respond to food, that's one of the few things they have some control over it, even if they're small. They don't want to eat something, they persist, right? I don't know who has children here, but that's my experience, because it's one of the few things they really have control over in life in some sense. Many things are taken care of them for them, where they're born, but that is something I think that matters a lot to children. And also, I really want to say this question was actually very good. And I would encourage, I forgot the name of the student, but maybe that's a nice thesis topic. If you're still looking for a thesis topic, I think that is of high policy relevance. There's also financial implication. And Robert's comments on the targeting might be an interesting area of research if you're still looking for a topic for the second year of the master program.
thank you very much. Yes, another questions from, yes, we have three questions. So start from the
Thank you for the chance. So my name is Tika. I'm first year of Master in Health Policy and Management. So I'm really intrigued with the labeling thing, the traffic lights, because honestly, I personally think that it's a little ineffective in Indonesia, because I've been to this one store back in my hometown. Like, they put these labels, but they kind of put it in the the supermarket shelf, and I was doing a bit of observation in the supermarket because I was with my parents. It seems like some parents are just being ignorant about the labels, and they just let their children to pick whatever it is they want from the shelf. So even if the labels have written that some foods are high in sugar or high in sodium, they just let their children to take everything they want from the shelves. So yeah, I think that's a bit ineffective here because, as what Professor Laksono have told us earlier, most of the people in Indonesia have low self-awareness about what is possible to happen in the future when you eat much sugar or foods in sodiums like that. And I personally think that it would be more effective if we could introduce it from such a younger age, like in the preschool, which one is good, like the good foods, which one has the sugar levels like that. Or for some teenagers, I think even if we have the labels on the foods, maybe our of health or the policymakers, they don't promote the labels as well. So maybe some teenagers wouldn't be as familiar to what the label means, even if some of us might have known it without being explained. So I think it would be to apa ya, ask for the social media influencers to actually introduce what the label means and what impacts it could give to the children in the future if they consume it too much from at such young age. So yeah, I think that's, I'm just sharing my opinion towards the research. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you so much. It's very insightful and good comment. I fully agree with you, and I also like that you touch upon also food environment, which is becoming extremely episogenic. So both at homes, at schools, and shops. So I think yes, it should be sort of a joint effort of nudging people, but also cleaning the environment from this extremely unhealthy foods and drinks. Yes, thank you so much. Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, and you in the first year as well of the master?
Yes, I'm the first year.
Well, if you're looking for a thesis topic, I like the idea of the influencers and social media personalities because usually individuals respond more strongly to information and knowledge when it comes from people they look up to or associate with or from the same age group. So that might be an interesting idea to test out. Maybe that can have a very positive influence. And I think there's even for Indonesia some evidence when it comes to health behaviors that this social media influence can be very positive. Of course, the problem is then how to do that in practice, like that it's still genuine. So as soon as I think, especially younger social media users will see, seems kind of not genuine or not, it's not a true message from the heart, and it might be ineffective. But I think that might be a very nice thesis topic.
Yeah, we have many social media influencer here. So, okay, so the second questions. Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you. Okay. Yeah, let me introduce myself. I'm Relmbus, if you don't know me. Yeah, I'm the Center for Health Policy and Management, also Erasmus School for Health Policy and Management. Here, maybe I don't ask, but I just want to make bring my argumentation regarding the policy for food for traffic light labeling for food, because in our prior research, we found out that this is quite political in some way, because when you implemented it, the Food and Medicine Regulatory or BEPOM, they feel like they already approved that. So it means like it's healthy enough to be in the market. or in another case, if we can promote to for the green light to be consumed more, they will take they were afraid that this can be a how to say that, for first incentive, which leads student or the to consume it more, and later it's become another burden for them. So maybe I just think, have you thought about that? Because that actually come from the discussion with the BEPAM, or like the food and also medicines regulatory agencies. Thank you.
Language is a very tough question. And I like it is based on your insights and research. And of course, we don't grapple with these things in an experiment like this. We can just give a signal. This might be something to pursue. So we produce scientific evidence. I think that's reasonably rigorous and robust. But then the next steps are more like the political economy of it and the politics of it. And that only goes through discussions like this. And I think you also presented some work today showing actually how you can integrate these kind of discussions throughout the whole research cycle. So maybe that's something we would have to do as well. But yeah, that requires dialogue. And I know from Europe it has taken many years for these traffic lights to be introduced, because industry interests, there's the different agencies, and they have different priorities or things that are important to them. And so it's not an easy thing to do. But worth pursuing, as the evidence shows.
Thank you for the third questions.
Yeah, hi, I'm Sita. I'm from SMUs and from the Center for Health Policy and Management. Yeah, very interesting presentations. Thank you very much. That's very insightful. I have questions actually.
Excuse me,
couple of questions. A couple of questions. One is about the choice architecture. I mean, I really like that, where we can opt for, making decisions, opt in or opt out. I was just thinking about in the real world setting, is there a way that we can, I don't know, design the kind of choice architecture that we want to put it in place that would really influence behavior towards the healthy eating option? Sorry. Yeah, thank you. Is it better? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Right. That's the question. And then the second question is about probably the ethical side of the intervention, if you will. How do you deal with ethical consideration when you're talking about interventions that are involving, say, changing behavior among vulnerable people, for instance? So yeah, that would be my questions. Thank you.
For those questions, they're really important questions. Also questions, of course, that when you design a startup project like this, you need to take those into account, right? So the first one would be indeed looking forward and thinking why is what we're doing relevant, right? That's the first question. Second is, should we be doing this at all, right? That's the let me start with the last one. So the ethical considerations for this treatment I guess the obvious answer here is or the cliché answer is that if you introduce treatments like this, you should not have treatments that actually do harm to kids, right? So we should at least make sure that we're not giving them food that is harmful. I don't know, is there anything else here? Were there other ethical snags that we had to think about in this case? Because we're giving food to kids, right? So that's, then you get into a little bit of a minefield when it comes to your ethical clearance. But I think it's the do no harm principle is to be first. But was there another ethical issue we had to think about?
Yeah, we always have to check, and usually, well, all our studies they are checked by the ethical review board, and we ask parents for the consent. So parents were aware that we will offering children some snacks so they could opt out. And also, I think this what we did with interaction, also telling the child, please don't eat it, let your parent, not only for our design, but it's also in case child may have allergies or whatever, so parent will know better whether the child can consume it or not. So.
Oh, sorry.
That's okay.
No, and that's also some comment that came up earlier. It's also then about it's an intervention that is transparent. So you do need to say, and even maybe in a debrief, say why you're doing that, and just not do it like in a devious way, key way. And so I think there has to be transparency, and that's important. And transparency also means that people can contest and say, we don't want this. So that would be beyond the study, actually. Linking back to also giving information. There was a comment earlier about the free school meal program, giving information why this is being given, and even to children, it would be important, because I think any policy, there needs to be some transparency.
Yeah. Any question that are not has been response or?
The second question on the choice architecture. Yeah, I think so in the studies, we didn't make broad changes to the choice architecture. And I think that that's more difficult to do. These were all studies where we ran different interventions at a class level or individual level, but one can do also, of course, much more structural interventions within the school. And there's, I think, a lot of for doing this type of research as well. I absolutely agree, it might have larger effects.
Thank you. So any questions more? So in your suggestions, if the label, traffic light label should be applied, so which agency or who are the one that are having the task to put the label?
That's a good question. Maybe a question back to the room. I mean, the Rembush might know. Who would actually do this? How would it be implemented? That varies across country and
Yeah, I'm just imagining that if it is the industry, so they are more reluctant to label their product.
Absolutely. I mean, I think in the Netherlands, I'm not Dutch, but in the Netherlands, my impression is that when it comes to these kind of changes, it goes through a dialogue. And the government will not just impose on industry, because I think that's very tricky. And that's, we've seen that for certain, even nutrients. So for instance, a few years back in the Netherlands, they banned trans fats from the food chain, or tried to minimize them. And that was done in discussion with industry. They didn't just say, oh, you have to get rid of trans fats from, these are hydrogenated vegetable oils from the food supply. So it's always in a discussion, I think, with industry.
Okay. Do you have any additional information on this?
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity to answer. So, based on our experience, the response from the industry, actually, they say like we will love to implement it, that as long as you, in this case the governments, can ensure that the product can be bought. It's like the switching between the healthier product to the unhealthier products. So as long as the governments ensure that there is a market for a healthy product, they will do that. But it is really difficult to ensure that. Yeah.
That's a good.
And
that's a good point. But on the other hand, I do have to say, I mean, the reason why private sector, they're usually very profitable, they are quick on their feet. And they respond very quickly to regulation, and then they will find ways around or find new consumer products. So the market response will be interesting to study as well. How does the composition of goods change in supermarket if this were to be enacted at scale? Like in our experiment, the labels on, or Margarita put the labels on, and we don't change anything about the products or the composition, but the market might respond and change the composition within the supermarket, change the formulation of products, and that would be something very interesting to study.
Yeah.
sorry, in addition to your comment, I think it's very very fascinating to remember that was something that we did 2020. So that was some time ago. But I remember at the time that interestingly enough, the opposition actually came from the regulator themselves. So not only from the industry, but from the regulator themselves. So there is some kind of hesitant, if you will, around the using the traffic light sign for food, packaged food, especially. And they say that it's based on their study that traffic light would be misleading, quote unquote, because it will give us almost like a signal to the consumers that as long as they consume the one that has a green light, then it's okay to consume as much as possible, as opposed to just eating one that has a red color, for instance. So they were arguing that it might be a good idea for Indonesia consumers, at least. At that time, that was their argument. So that was interesting. And then the second thing that I think I remember about that was the idea of monitoring and controlling those that are not packaged food. Because the traffic light would only work for manufactured food. But they also argue that a lot of Indonesians are eating foods that are not packaged foods. So foods that are sold in food trucks or anything like that. And it's kind of difficult to monitor that. And so they'll say, it's are we supposed to be, focusing on packaged foods that are not the major consumption anyway, and looking at those that are not packaged food and consumed more largely by the population. So it was just interesting arguments. I think we can, of course, discuss among ourselves and amongst the policymakers and the scientists at that time. But it was just interesting that apparently hesitancy are not only coming from the industry, but could also come from the regulator. And we need to think about that and need to come up with more evidence about nudging behavior, if you will, with this kind of food labeling policy. Thank you.
Thank you. They are all tough questions, yeah. Okay, and also nice, right answer also. And see that we still have more student. If you are still choosing the right thesis title, then this the opportunity to get more and more opportunity to get. Especially we already have two title of thesis, yeah, already for the first semesters or first year. Any other questions that we still have maybe around 5 minutes? Are there any closed or a comment from Prof. Laksono?
If you ask me question, I
Yeah.
make a close one. I think this is what we are lacking in Indonesia, that we are not producing evidence from our theoretical assumption. Sometimes our faculties have no specific specialties like health economists, which is more interested to create research through making evidence to prove the theories. So in our setting, probably it is too expensive to do the research to produce evidence for policy. But if we take lesson from what policies are executable in other countries, probably we just want to try whether it can be modified in our Indonesian settings. So I mean that is good. So I don't know. Sometimes I love the student try to do the more policy evaluation research. What type of policy they want to do, and then how can we modify that policy into a better acceptance or more better in implementation. But I enjoy the way the research is produced to provide evidence for in order the policy should consider the theoretical assumption on your expertise like health economic things. Probably we need more time to do that because many of our awards, academic awards, which is very small in terms of rupiah. So for student, usually I myself more asking student to evaluate whatever policy there and put some context of some theory to do that and modify it for the better practice or the policy, for better policy implementation. Thank you again, and this is probably new for us. Not many using theories to produce evidence for policies. Thank you.
Thank you, Prof. Mubasir. So we are coming now at the closing remarks from Prof. Laksono for us.
Yeah, this is one issue that may be very important for us. We understand that the theoretical concept is there, and the research is maybe in a beautiful way of doing research is good one. But there's a big part that we have to face: political economy of policy making, and this is also very, very tough and needs some stamina or maybe patience for maybe making recommendations, because back to the issue of the political economy, yes, economy is very strong, economic incentive, I mean, for changing the behavior of not only people, but also policymakers, and also some of industrial complex also mentioned, if you reduce the consumption of, say, sugar or tobacco, then the economic will have, say, 3% loss, something like that. It is very, very powerful message. So not many policymakers are happy with this kind of research, but at least we do something on this issue and make consistent recommendations for you. Thank you. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you very much, Prof. Laksono. So give applause to all speakers and discussants, all participants also. Thank you very much. So I will pass it to the Master of Ceremony.
Ladies and gentlemen, we have now reached the end of today's guest lecture. On behalf of the organizing committee, we extend our sincere appreciation to the discussants, our speakers, and our moderator, and all the participants for your active engagement throughout the sessions. Before we really close, we will proceed with a two-stage photo sessions. First, we kindly invite the speakers, the discussants, Prof. Laksono, and the moderator to forward to the front area for a group photo. And Prof. Mubasir, could you please turn on your camera as we are about to begin the photo sessions? Yes. But from
That's all, yeah. Oh, yes.
Should we stand or?
So, between two pillars.
One, two, three, smile. Once again, one, two, three, smile. Different pose, Pak Mop. Yes.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. You may now return to your seats. Yes, Prof, tetap di depan dulu, Prof. Yeah. Okay, next we would like to invite all the participants together in the middle to join the group photo with our speakers and discussants. Yes. No. Yeah, yes. Guys. Sampai nggak? Nggak sampai ya kalau sana. Mas, Mbak, boleh. And Pak Mo, could you please open your camera again?